I want to welcome you all to the program and my guest today, Matt Laughlin. Thank you, Matt, for being with me.
Thank you, Tom, for having me.
I'm very excited about this conversation because of what you do. You're a life and business coach. And for 25 years, that was my tent making. Okay. So, in the scriptures, St. Paul.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So he preached the gospel free of charge. And the way he did that was by making tents.
Yeah.
And so when people would say to me, well, what do you do for a living? I'd say, well, I'm a tent maker. And my tent making was coaching and consulting. And
Wonderful.
So the idea of life and business coaching was a rich part of my own experience in these last decades. And it's so fascinating because I find that the things that make someone a successful coach actually make them good at life, make them good human beings.
Yeah.
So that's my entry point.
Wonderful.
Basically, I'm saying you're a good human being, Matt. Did you catch that?
Did you
get that?
I did. Say more. No,
Yes.
I love it. Yeah, I had no idea that you did a lot of business consulting in your past. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So today we're here to talk about all kinds of things. So you're someone that is doing life and business coaching, and yet you're Catholic. And I'm very interested to hear about your faith, that journey of faith that has emerged in you. And I know that there's a fascinating story there. And then how does faith inform coaching? But then in some ways, we're going to be giving the folks that are listening some free coaching, because a lot of folks listening are facing situations where the principles and practices of life coaching and business coaching that we can get into, they're going to be very relevant. They're going to apply to the situations that some folks are facing right now. But let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning. So you tell me a bit about your life, and we're going to weave it right into faith.
Wonderful. Yeah, I grew up in Spokane, Washington, oldest of 6 kids, 5 sisters.
Blessed are you among women.
I know, right?
No one's ever said that to you before.
No, they
right?
haven't. No, but they shaped my life. I have to take my hat off to them. I remember one Christmas Eve, we're all just sitting around drinking tea. And I was like, man, if I had 5 brothers, there's no way I would spend 5 hours drinking tea and talking. And of course they were athletes and they had their masculine side. But my faith, I would say what really fired up my faith was my undergrad years at Carroll College, a little Catholic school in Montana. And Father Gene Peoples, who's deceased now, the priest there, this idea of spiritual direction, I hadn't heard of it really, or didn't understand it, but I ended up meeting with him throughout my undergraduate years every other week. And I remember one of his first things, like he evoked the scripture, be still and know I am God. And he asked me to just sit 5 minutes quietly in the morning. And I remember I was student body president, running all over the place with my head cut, chicken with his head cut off. And I remember how much that demanded of me just to be still for 5 minutes prayerfully. Mm-hmm. And now I can't. It feels like an hour is not enough, and I want to retreat from my kids and my life and just stay there, But I would say that's where my faith really got the flame was fanned.
All right. But you said something that was sort of step function, big deal, which was, hey, I'm here at college. And all of a sudden I'm meeting with the priest every other week in spiritual direction.
Yeah.
How does that happen? I mean, that's not a typical, he's not seeing 850 young men.
That I can't explain. I transferred to Carroll. I met him. He had an office in the dorm. And I love the Lord, and I think he recognized something in me, and I had an affinity to him. I took a religious ed course with him. I remember it was his history of the Catholic Church. I'm recalling like the chalkboard and things. And it was just a very natural, organic relationship. It wasn't advertised anywhere or that sort of thing. And we took a liking to one another.
Nice.
And so,
well, then I'm going to put it on his side. He saw something in you, even if that was the capacity to benefit from a spiritual director. There needs to be a certain amount there in the person who would say, I'm going to walk with you in a spiritual direction relationship.
Sure.
And he obviously saw a capacity in you to say, in walking together, this is going to be a blessing to you. Because that's a use of his time too. So there's a pouring in that goes with that kind of relationship.
Yeah, it was a mutually delightful relationship, a mutual love and warmth.
I'm going to jump way ahead. Right now you do life and business coaching. Have you drawn any, insights, principles, practices from your spiritual direction relationship into how you see and walk with people as a coach?
I would say very much so. And it's only to have the courage to make that utterance and reveal that about myself in recent years that I've been at ease about that or owning that quality. I want to be respectful too, because formally speaking, spiritual direction, I'm not formally a part of an order. I'm a Catholic layman. So I don't claim any authority in that regard, but I most delight in working with clients who have a deep faith, and you could tell it's dear to them that a high priority is my life in alignment with the will of the Lord, and how can that guide my decisions and the confrontations. And I find it incredibly rewarding and rich to have just to be in a space of that conversation. And I was actually just thumbing through a book by Thomas Merton on spiritual direction the other day, and in preparation for a talk I'm going to be giving later this month. And it was fascinating. I read this book like 15, 20 years ago when I was a practicing psychotherapist. So originally I was licensed professional counselor in Colorado, and I had a private practice for several years. And that aspect of me that long wanted to be a priest or a monk, I would read these things, and I took all these notes on the correlations Thomas Merton laid out on what spiritual direction is and isn't, and quoting St. Augustine and various Catholic saints. So anyway, of late, I've been it's funny you asked me that, because it's been on my mind.
That's fascinating.
So like, wow, this does very much apply to business coaching, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the reasons I mentioned that is that all this coaching that I did, the principal model of coaching that I had came from spiritual direction. Because of all my background, I spent a number of years in the seminary where I had a spiritual director.
Sure.
And realized that there's an awful lot there that comes into play when you're walking with someone in a coaching relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I found that super helpful. And it was something that really wasn't that present when coaching emerged as a specific form of engagement, right? There were trainers and consultants.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now you have coaches come in. And that was different than some HR professional who's saying, I'm here to basically give you the way out the door.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. To date, there really isn't a word that covers all the dimensions of what happens in those conversations.
Yeah.
It's like, well, coaching, well, sort of, consulting, well, sort of,
Yep.
So
I like to use the word accompaniment. I walk with people. Now that's become a big word in the Catholic world through Pope Francis.
Has it?
Yeah, he uses that quite a bit, that as a disciple, missionary disciples, we're called to accompany people, to go be with them where they're at, walk with them, accompany them.
Yeah.
I think he was listening to some of my early talks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because
let's hope so. Yeah.
By the way, you've got a great radio voice.
Oh, thank you.
Way better than mine. I love that.
I've been told this actually.
Yeah, that's nice. I got a face for radio. You got a voice for radio. That's good.
That's great.
Yeah. Actually, no, it's funny. There was a woman who came up to me. I mentioned it in a talk somewhere or something like that. And she came up to me and she said, my background is in audio production. And she said that the voice that I don't like, she said, it's actually a very comforting voice. And she was able to bring up some of the features of the voice that I always looked at as a negative. And she says, no, you have no idea that these are actually tremendous positives when they're heard. So, and that was so enlightening to me. And I say that because like a lot of folks right now that are either watching this interview or listening, they might look at a part of their life and say, this is something that I feel bad about. I don't like about myself. And I feel like it holds me back. When in fact, it's actually a gift.
Yeah.
It's something that God has given to them. And precisely at that point in their lives where they feel like this is a fail. No. It's actually a gift. It's going to help you advance. Is that something that you find in the folks that you're walking with, either in like life coaching and business coaching, that they're looking at something as a detriment or as a point of brokenness that they need to overcome, when in fact it's like, no, there's a gift here and you're missing it?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the greatest inner pivots is that.
That's a great phrase, by the way. An inner pivot. What's an inner pivot?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to cut you off here. I want to know what an inner pivot is.
An inner pivot, I would say, this is on the fly, but just a phrase that came to me, but where you inwardly take on a new perspective and see your life and your whole situation in an expanded context, such that what seemed like a burden, now you're almost on your knees grateful to God for the opportunity to bear that burden.
Mhm.
And there's the thing that's humbling about that is, often as a coach, as you know, you could see it as, it's like, I evoke this often for people with children, because, we love our children and we see their innocent beauty, and we could see that the way they're seeing themselves, let's say if they're an adolescent and they're so tormented about something, and you could see as plain as day, it has no reality. Like, they're not subject to that limitation. They're not really what they think that they are, that themselves to be. And despite telling them that or pointing out as plain as day, they have to discover it on their own. And there's a sort of grace to that. So it's very humbling. As a coach, I would say that is one of the most delightful pivots, when people make that shift, and there's grace involved with that. It's like a grand recontextualization. That they're not.
Grand recontextualization.
Yeah,
Matt, I love these
I mean,
phrases you come up with. Of
what's
course, I'm
occurring
going to
to me,
steal
yeah.
them and pretend they're
Sure,
mine.
take them, man.
Okay,
Yeah,
this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking with Matt Laughlin today. He is a life and business coach. He works here in the Coeur d'Alene area, but your clients, I'm sure, go beyond that in this
That's
whole
right.
new world that we're in.
Sure.
You probably can serve folks through the internet as well.
I do. Yeah. I originally started my coaching practice. I stepped down. I owned a couple of magazines, stepped out of corporate leadership positions, and just dove entirely into my private coaching business. But now people are discovering me, and I have quite a number of remote clients. So
Nice.
I was reluctant. I was like, I wanted to be all in person, but I might do something where I haven't set this up, where if someone works with me remotely for 6 to 12 months, we have to meet at least once.
Mhm.
There's something transmitted when you get to be with somebody. So
yeah, it's an interesting thing that they're talking about a gift, and the gifts have limits. The idea of remote interacting,
Yeah.
right, is there is something missing in personal presence.
Yeah.
Right. There is something that's missing, whether it's body cues and all that,
Yeah.
or just the richness of what's communicated when you're in someone's presence.
Yeah.
Compared to there's a degree of flatness, no matter how well something's produced.
Yeah.
When it's done over the internet, even with the wonderful
It's
tools that we
almost
have.
like to jump up to a totally different type, like the power of relics, like to be in the presence of a relic in the Catholic faith. Something's transmitted.
Yes.
If you're 800 miles away, you just don't quite sense it. But if you're in the room or next to the tomb, you sense it.
Yes.
So.
One of the ways that I've taken inspiration from the internet or towards the internet, how to see it and relate to it, is St. John Paul II. Back in 2002 and 2003, for the World Day of Communications. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? The popes put out messages for different days, and this is one of them. Those 2 years, he focused on the internet, and he raised up a vision. He said the internet should be a place where the face and light of Christ should shine forth. And that was so inspiring to me. I began to okay, what does that mean? The face of Christ shining forth. What does that mean? That you can somehow on the internet have an interaction that's so real that you sense that I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more than a technique. It's more than a technique of saying, okay, when you're interacting with someone on video, look into the camera rather than at the screen, so that they'll actually think they're looking at you.
Sure.
There's something richer than that. And I don't think I've plumbed the depths of it, but that vision, that's an exalted ideal, to have that sense of the face and light of Christ.
It reminds me of, I think it's a function of what we are. This is something I've been thinking about of late. Like, the faith demands us to be and become that which we value. And a phrase that when Mary in Scripture says, "My soul magnifies the Lord," I've just kind of been being with that lately. And like, it's a profound statement that my soul has a capacity to magnify the Lord. And the analogy that came to my mind recently was that of like a mirror or glass. Like if you were next to the sunshine and you had a muddy mirror, no matter how much you move that mirror around, you can't quite see the sun reflect back to you. But if you do your inner work, your own spiritual purification, you let go of your shortcomings, and quietly you become more and more holy. Your mirror is going to be clearer and clearer, and you're going to magnify that light. So I think, and I'm not surprised at all Pope John Paul said that.
So you've just touched upon the Catholic theology of growth and holiness, whether or not you realize it, Matt.
Yeah, I did not.
It's captured in a term, ablatio. Ablatio is St. Bonaventure. And ablatio means the process of removal. That growing in holiness is less about becoming what you're not and more about removing what's hiding who you already are.
Yeah.
So you are that mirror.
Yeah.
But there are things that are hiding the mirror-like capacity.
Yeah.
And if we can only wash that mirror clean, then we'll discover who we already are and who are meant to be.
Beautiful.
Isn't that powerful?
Oh, it's so powerful.
Yeah, I didn't make that up.
No,
right?
that's beautiful. It's which saint was that?
Saint Bonaventure. He
gonna
was
look
the
this up, yeah.
7th minister general in the Franciscan order. And he was really born for his time. Great theologian. He is a doctor of the church, and he was assigned a position to teach at the University of Paris in the same document that assigned St. Thomas Aquinas a teaching role at the University of Paris. Can you imagine going to lectures at the University of Paris in 1257 and having 2 doctors of the church giving lectures? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's hard to, I wonder if there's someone like that among us that we can't quite appreciate or see.
Yeah.
So no, that reminds me, in the East, I think it's like the path of renunciation, to identify the limitation, the falsehood, and renounce it.
Yes.
It reminds me of that.
Yeah, you're getting me going down all these theological paths right now, Matt. I'm thinking about the mom. Talk about Matt Laughlin today on the program. And Matt is actually going to be speaking at a CDA collaborative. It's a Coeur d'Alene, here, I was going to say Washington, Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. There's a collaborative event, an event bringing together folks who are in the area, folks who are new to the area, folks who have are in business or looking to make connections, but have a common connection in faith as well, to be able to fellowship, have some time to receive some good teaching, and then to interact together. And the first kickoff event is happening on Friday, October 21st. Begins at 6, time to socialize, meet some folks. 7 o'clock, you'll be giving a talk. And then afterwards, there'll be some more socializing time. And that's happening in Coeur d'Alene. And you can find out more information about that, and we're going to learn more about it by going to coeuroperations.com. Coeur as in Coeur d'Alene, COEUR, coeuroperations.com, coeuroperations.com. And there you'll get a link to register for this event. Are you excited to be at the event?
I am. Yeah. The Colleen Colabo, a local business owner here, had this inspiration. So I was delighted to accept the invitation to speak. And here in Coeur d'Alene, there's quite a dynamic group of faith-filled professionals, and it just sounds fun. I'm a little nervous, when it's humbling to be asked to speak on faith matters. It just gets you very humble, the more you get into it. And but I'm very much looking forward to it. So
that's an interesting question. And a lot of folks here, I have found in the last 5 years, have come to me with questions. These are folks that are in the business world, and they're trying to navigate the way that faith meets life, especially in the business world, especially when there are policies being implemented that run up against deeply held religious beliefs. And there's a question about whether or how I can live my faith authentically without compromising my faith in the workplace. And this is something that I've always navigated, because while I was doing consulting and coaching work for all these 25 years, I was also on the radio and was also very visible in the world of faith. That was my principal work. Remember, this was my tent making. Okay, so what's the first thing an executive is going to do, or some professional is going to do when they hear that some guy's going to talk? They're going to Google him, look him up. And they look me up, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, wait a minute. This is a Jesus guy. What's he doing here talking to us about leadership development or whatever, some theme? And it was so interesting how many times after my talks, and I wouldn't mention Jesus during the talks, I would be doing my own teaching that was fitting for that context. They'd come up to me afterwards and they'd say, I know your background. Like somehow it's a secret thing, like kind of pull me aside, right? And, or they would say, I could see the way that those principles and practices you put out there are traced back to your faith. And it really resonated with me. Is that something that you find is a common theme? So when you're doing life coaching and business coaching, the folks that you're engaged with, how often are you either drawing principles and practices that are connected to your faith, or just outwardly, the folks that you're serving, they bring their faith out onto the table?
Yeah, I was listening to your question from the macro kind of political level, like culturally, when things are put in place and where your faith and business intersect, where you have to kind of take a stand or not. And then personally, it's funny you asked that. I even this talk, for instance, I have a lot of local clientele, and generally I abide by the principle attraction versus promotion. Like, be that which you value. You don't need to talk about it, so to speak. But then recently I've just been discerning, like even on a social media handle, to put Catholic revert to out myself. And I had this physician I follow, a very popular physician who talks about kind of longevity, optimizing your health, that kind of thing. He messaged me out of the blue from St. Paul, Minnesota, delighted to talk to me because he's a very devout Catholic. And just from putting like little Catholic revert in my handle. So it's all a mysterious thing. And where I've decided to fall is like that Saint Francis de Sales quote, be who you are and be it well, so that you're, I think the following sentence, so that's a statement that always struck out to me, but it's so that you're master, so that the master craftsman may delight in what you are, or something to that effect. But be who you are and be it well. And in truth, when I'm one-on-one with a client, I'm completely myself. I work with LDS, atheists, Christians, Catholics, and they never detect that I'm trying to control them or make them see the world in a particular way. It's never been an actual problem. So it occurred to me like, well, I'll just be myself on a macro. And because in the end, it brings up fear of survival, and I'm going to be impoverished and no one will hire me, all those personal interests. And where I've come lately is just to not apologize for what I am, but not try to, and people I work with detect this. I no way try to get them to see the world the way I do politically or religiously, so.
Yeah. So Matt is here. If you're just listening on the radio, Matt's like, why is Tom pulling out his smartphone and looking at something while here? My daughter sent me this quote this morning, and I'm going to read it to you, and I want you to react to it based on what I just shared.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay. So it's a pretty cool quote. So now you have to at least say it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Since if the host says that, you kind of have to agree. Okay. As God has distributed to every man, as the Lord has called everyone, so let him walk. That was the quote from Scripture. And now here's the reflection. No one can do better with his life than that. No one can put it to a better use. Any life must be perfect in proportion as it does what it was made to do. There are many lives that are brilliant failures. They strive after many things that they were never intended to do and fail in that one thing. It seems strange that a reasonable being should never ask himself why he was put on earth, or that it should not occur to him that the reason must be found in the will of his creator. At the end of the day of our earthly life, we have no answer to our maker, whether we have been employed about our own work or about his. We have to answer to our maker, whether we've been employed about our own work or about his, whether we have even made an effort to find out what he would have us do. A life that is inspired by such a motive is sure to be a success. For of this we may be absolutely certain, that each of us can fulfill in our life that for which we were created. We cannot be sure that we have the gifts needed for any other purpose. For God, in creating us, equipped us for the work for which he created us. We have every gift of nature and of grace, of mind and body that is needed for this work.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, profound.
Profound.
Better than very cool.
No, it's actually perfect synchronicity. The talk I'm giving for Coeur d'Alene Collaborative on October 21st here in Coeur d'Alene, I titled it 4 Modes of Being Our Faith Demands of Us. And one of them centers around aligning one's life with the will of God. And I'm a huge Meister Eckhart fan. I've read all of his collected works, and he's got there's this little fragment of his works where he says something to this effect, which is, if you know in your heart of hearts above all else that you are aligned and seeking the will of God above all else, then you can trust your personal inclinations, your personal bent, and how you appear to be guided. Like, trust it. And that came to mind, and hearing that, like, we're one mode of being I'll be speaking on is we must align our life to the degree we're able through discernment and prayer with the will of God. The best we can discern that. And no, I love that. That's beautiful. It's timely.
I'll send you the quote.
Yeah,
You
please
can
do.
use it and say, I found this deep prayer
I'm
reflection.
taking notes already. I'm like, who was that saying? Okay, send me that one. So
yeah. Well,
wonderful.
that's St. Alphonsus de Liguori had said something very similar to Meister Eckhart. He said, in the major decisions of life, God will not let you be deceived.
I think you can trust that deeply.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. If you earnestly go humbly.
Yes. As St. Augustine,
what more
love God and do what you will.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you really love God, that means there's a union of wills, and what you will truly deeply desire is what God desires for you.
Yeah. Yeah. You are his instrument. Yes.
Yeah. Do you want another one? This is an Aquinas one.
I would love it. Yeah.
He said this in De Potentia Dei. God does not will that you will what he wills. God wills that you will what he wills you to will.
Well,
it's a tongue twister.
It's a one in being. We're not a separate floating entity apart from him.
Right. And we're not infinite. So God does not will that you will what he wills. He's infinite. You're finite. But God does will that you will what he wills you to will. In other words, God does have a personal, perfect will for your life that he's willing you to say yes to be determined
with, and
absolutely.
Yeah. Open oneself to.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I'm talking with Matt Laughlin today. Matt is a life and business coach, a Catholic here in Coeur d'Alene, and interviewing Matt. I saw you, Matt, at the convocation for Coeur de Christ.
Yes.
Which was neat to be with you at that event.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah. And so you have kiddos.
Yeah.
And do you have is your oldest at Coeur de Christ or on the way?
No, he's 9. He just turned 9.
Oh, so you're just planning ahead.
Yeah. I got a late start. It was kind of having kids was part of my Catholic revert story. We have 4 boys, thank God.
Wait a minute, you're the first of 6 with 5 girls. Now the next generation, all boys. How does that happen?
My joke is God felt sorry for me. He's like, all right, you want boys? Here you go. When my 5th sister was born, I remember just crying at the hospital, like a young kid.
Well, you were 16. I mean, come
right.
on.
No, right. Yeah, exactly. So we have 4 children. 9, 6, 3, and a baby. So
nice.
Yeah.
Carrie, my wife, said that 4 kids is when she was crushed because she wanted to do it all. She had that vision that was like promoted to her that said, you can do it all. You can have it all. Yeah. And then by the time the 4th one came,
the humbling comes.
It was just like crushed because you're completely outnumbered at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
You're just, you get more and more progressively humble. You just do the best you can. Yeah.
But I think that's an important, like, again, talk about some of the things you've been mentioning in terms of like life coaching and business coaching, that sense of saying, you know what, there could be a false identity in there, right? This beautiful quote, it was all about don't fall into a false identity, but you were made to do, and you're given the gifts and graces to fulfill a certain call and plan and path. So discern that and live that. And for Carrie, the 4 kids was discover the gift of being a mother. Discover the gift of sinking more deeply into being a mother. And that, you can change the world one diaper at a time, right? Ha, ha, ha. Yeah. But no, there's something very profound about the way in which you can discover and live with tremendous fulfillment, the transformative influence that you have on someone's life through that identity, mother. It's not just a role, it's something deeper that goes to the core of who you are.
Absolutely. It's, you evoke the word identity, identifications. That seems to be central to, again, going back to, you can only take away. I really feel like more confidently as a coach, when people are living their identity, they actually don't think of themselves much. They're not like, the more attached you are to a particular identity, and life throws you a curveball, or there's friction, there's a lot of tension there. But when you're being what you are fully, naturally, as a mother is, being the full fulfillment of that, there's very little friction there. There's
but for guys, and this, I'm not saying only for guys, but I think guys who are like roll up the sleeves and battle in the world. There's the up and to the left, or no, up and to the right mentality that says next year has to be more, bigger, better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it can become such a temptation to say, I've got to outdo the other guy or outdo those that I'm seeing myself in competition with.
Mm,
And that, I think, is one of those situations, again, where it can lead us to a false identity
absolutely.
rather than this quote, which is, no, go deeper into what your actual call is.
Mm,
And what endures
mm,
is sanctity, holiness,
mm,
virtue,
mm,
character. Those are the things that
mm,
cross the goal line of death. There you
mm,
go, the goal line of death. What we're going to, when we cross that goal line of death, all the stuff, the house, the retirement account, all that stuff stays behind. What we carry into eternity is our holiness,
mm,
is the depth of our union with God.
Mm.
And that's what endures forever.
mm,
I don't think we have that perspective enough.
mm. No, certainly. It, yeah, when that becomes a guiding light, I think going back to the coaching or working with people in a context like that, when they're continually brought back to these questions, okay, what do I actually value most? What is truly most dear to me? What is the highest function of my life? It sets those sorts of sub-tier questions, like the expressions of that. Oh, well, this season I own this business and I'm running this and running that.
Mhm.
It kind of casts a guiding light through all of those things.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can really navigate powerfully. There may be a season when the Lord calls a man, like let's say in his late 50s, to be very prolific in the business world and to be very fruitful.
Mhm.
But that's not an identity crisis if it's rooted in discernment and it's nested in the totality of what he values most. And
Nested in the totality, man, this is so awesome. This is so
I
cool.
hope I'm not being too.
I love it.
verbose.
You're being very articulate. I think it's really awesome. That's Matt Laughlin again talking with me today. If you're watching this on video, folks, if you're only listening to this on audio, you're missing out on the opportunity to see Matt and our interaction, which you can find on our YouTube channel, My Catholic Faith TV. You can go there and you can enjoy this video, as well as we posted on our Facebook page, I Love My Catholic Faith with Dr. Tom Curran. And also the podcast, if you're not signed up for it, Dr. Tom Curran podcast. So you can find that on Apple Podcasts. So Matt, as you are navigating this reality, you got 4 kids, you are attempting to have a difference in the world today as a coach, life coach, business coach. What are you noticing in this moment that kind of pops out? Like, we've gone through a lot in the world in the last few years that just not typical. You could be involved in the business world for 30 years. And the last couple of years have just been so extraordinary. There's a lot of dislodging. There's a lot of shedding of things that were considered normal.
Sure.
How has that impacted the kind of themes that you're addressing in your coaching or that you're just seeing in your life?
I think, from my perspective, these last couple of years, it's really illuminated in a deep way how essential it is to get clear about what one values and to what degree their life is an expression or aligned with that. And people are making cross-country moves. It's actually been an incredibly fruit-filled, joyful couple of years for me. I've certainly felt indignation at what I see going on in the world, and I have strong positions about many of these things. But what I've found is that in a way, people are coalescing. They're not, this life is ephemeral, and we could fritter away our time in distractions and amusements and just non-essential things. And I think a true sign of maturity in health is like discerning what is actually essential and what's non-essential, and the degree to which you can let go of the non-essential and can progressively shape your life in a way that's much more in accord with truth, goodness, and beauty. So I've delighted in the people I've met these last couple of years that have only come across my path by virtue of them making a courageous move in their personal life.
All right, I'm going to ask you the hard question. You're going to hold up the mirror to you. So when I think about something that was essential in Carrie in my life with all of our kiddos, that we realized, it's not as essential as we think it is, and we need to dial that back and get it in a better place, was sports.
Yeah.
So our kids involved in sports at one level and realizing that, wait a minute, this is not worth what it costs.
Yeah.
Okay, in your life in the last couple of years, has there been a new enlightenment, a new sense for you and your wife regarding, this is essential and we're not giving it enough time and attention, or we've made this essential, and we need to dial it back because it's not as important as we've made it to be?
Two thoughts come to my mind. One, I want to pick your brain on the sports thing because
Sure.
that's a discernment with young children, and there's no perfect solution, and I want to balance the whole.
Oh, no,
the
we've got the
trade-offs.
perfect solution, you see, so.
So I do think they're overemphasized in today's world. I actually just Twittered this. I had a dream of Padre Pio about 8 years ago. He appeared in a dream holding up the Eucharist, standing outside a football stadium. And at that time, I had been watching sports a bit too much on ESPN, or I haven't watched TV for years, but even just paying attention to and it was just a wonderful dream to kind of reset what's most important. But yeah, to me, these last 2 years, the biggest personal confrontation, frankly, our values are on board. I can confidently and honestly say, I feel like my life the last 3 years has been an expression of what I value.
Mhm.
Where it collided was interpersonal relationships and family members or friends whose position, word, or way of being is not in accord with even little things with the whole vaccination thing and COVID. I'm not going to mask my kids or vaccinate my kids. There's no way on God's green earth, in that context. And so I had to let go of approval, or that may have brought up some friction. Even with parents, I love my parents. They're not going to be listening to this. I love my parents. God bless them. So it's like that whole balance of honor your parents, but at the same time, be true to yourself, So I would say the biggest challenge for us the last couple of years has been also to let go of the temptation of the righteous moral indignation or prideful wasting of time, of juicing the position you have. And can you believe even that, I think, is a major spiritual error. Like, you may be in the right, but if you waste 45 minutes of your evening with your wife bickering about someone in the wrong, you're in the wrong. So it's been a big growth year to allow people I love to disagree with me, to firmly hold a line, and then not to dwell on it, to love them, and maybe not see them as frequently because of the consequences. And then to grow in letting people live their life, live and let live, not to get caught up into that righteous indignation, a spiritual trap of pride. I don't know. Those are some things that come to my mind. I don't know if that's what you're.
Oh, no, those are
yeah.
great. Well, I didn't know how you would answer
sure.
it, but I like what you said, because I think that's one of the challenges that people involved in business face. If they're offering professional services or whatever services, or they're welcoming in customers, the kinds of things that you just said, being able to navigate well interpersonal conversations in a life and business setting,
absolutely,
is a really big deal.
Oh yeah.
So that's my lead in to say, you're going to be actually giving a talk in a couple of weeks at the CDA Collaborative, the CDA Collaborative, on October the 21st, begins at 6:00. You talk at 7, time for fellowship before and afterwards. And folks, if you want to be able to hear Matt and register for the event, you can go to Coeur Operations, Coeur is in Coeur d'Alene, COEUR, CoeurOperations.com. There is a registration fee. You can sign up for that, and you'll be able to be with a bunch of other like-minded folks. They love the Lord, they love their faith, and they are also trying to do a good job in the world, to do good in this world. And to hear you talk about, did you say 4 modes of being? 4 modes
that
of
our
being.
Faith demands of us.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that's
a verbose statement.
I know, these are great titles. I love this. This is really awesome. So Matt, let's we have just a few more minutes, but let's kind of dive in. Did you want to talk about sports? You mentioned that as a pick my brain, or we can go down another trail.
Yeah, we could pass over sports. It's not a deep question.
Well, here's the thing. I want to say this, and this is relevant to what you just shared, and that is, in the world of business, especially if you're serving other companies, you shouldn't always expect to be accepted. I find that, I mentioned to you, this is now years ago, I'm speaking at a very prominent sort of Fortune 50 company, speaking to a very high level set of executives. So the senior executives and the next level down at an offsite. So I'm going to be there for a day, giving all these presentations and walking them through stuff. There was someone who went to the chief human resources officer, it was her event, and said, I protest having this guy speak because of his background in faith.
Sure.
Do you know who it was? It was the person in charge of diversity and inclusion.
Oh yeah, of course, of course. How ironic.
I want you to hear that, right?
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Yeah.
but the person in charge, the person whose call it was to ensure and protect diversity and inclusion in the organization was saying, I object to this person speaking.
I will exclude you.
You're not included. We are not so diverse. Well, thanks be to God, the chief human resources officer was smart enough to say, you have to widen your meaning of diversity and inclusion to include this person as well. And at the end of the first talk, this woman came up to me and said, thank you. That was a really good talk. And the funny thing was, she had no idea that the entire talk was rooted in my Catholic faith and
wonderful.
Catholic vision of life.
Sure.
I just talked about what it meant to be a person
and
a person operating in the world.
Yeah.
And she was very moved by it. She was ready to be offended, ready to stand up and point the finger, and instead was really taken aback.
Yeah.
So I take a couple of lessons from that. One is, don't be afraid to be a witness to your faith.
Sure.
But don't also just think that you can go in like a sledgehammer, but you have to be innocent as a dove, but wise as a serpent.
Sure.
Right. So being able to speak in a way that they can hear, they can receive, even those that would want to say, you're my enemy, to say, I dare you to make me your enemy when this is the truth I'm bringing to you.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of, I had a mentor, psychiatrist mentor. He once said when I was a therapist.
How did you feel about that? That was a joke.
No. But yeah, he's like, you can bring spiritual principles into business, just don't call them spiritual, In most cases, you have to be sensitive to the context and the audience. And but at the same time, there's times when you have to stand for truth without apology and without an emotional investment on how it lands. And
yes.
I can respect that.
And I think that's a lot of what folks, so we're here talking now, if you're a business owner, or even you're just a mom or a dad, and you've got kids on a soccer team, and this is a public soccer team. Not everyone's going to agree with you on that sideline, and you have to let that be okay. But that doesn't also mean you just get stepped on. I think that this is where we who live in this moment have to make a decision. Are we Americans who happen to be Catholic, or Catholics who happen to be American? And if we land on our deepest identity is found in our relationship with God through faith in Christ, faith as a Catholic Christian disciple of Jesus, then we bring that to bear on our Americanism, on our being American, in a way that says, no, we are going to be a gift to America by being fully Catholic, and not by letting you attempt to shut down that dimension of our lives. And we have definitely moved more fully into a moment when you sometimes have to make a choice. Mainstream
absolutely.
America is saying this, but if you go along with that, if you just float downstream with that, you'll end up betraying the faith, not just in belief, but in life. Because truths, ideas have consequences, really devastating, dark, broken consequences if we let lies go unchecked or unchallenged.
I think, one of the greatest vulnerabilities in the psyche of people in this context, and in our collective psyche, you could say, is confusing compassion with accommodation, or passivity with lovingness.
Well, I like that. Confusing compassion with accommodation. Let's hear some more.
I think people who haven't they'll accommodating a false idea or a falsehood out of a seeming compassion. I don't want to hurt their feelings. I want this person to feel accepted, is a great vulnerability. I think it's one of our biggest, you might say, spiritual chinks as Americans. So the upside to it is there's an intrinsic impulse to be caring and considerate of other people's feelings. The downside is an undeveloped intellect or an absence of wisdom. So people, you see this in personal family relationships, alcohol. You could use any sort of addiction or traumatic something happening in a family system where parents unwittingly, out of love, they think are accommodating something that's very dark and devastating. And so I have a real heart for it. I don't judge it. But sometimes the most loving thing, it's kind of the joke in like 12-step AA communities, like, oh, you love your alcoholic son, we'll give him a case of whiskey and check him out of a hotel room. Let him hit so hard that he turns to God and reforms his life. Why are you? So you could apply that distinction. I think politically, on the political front, we're doing that. We can go on and on, but we're as a country, we're accommodating things that can lead to destruction in the name of compassion.
Yeah. I love it. I got several things that in response. First, Bonaventure, you love Bonaventure.
Yeah.
He wrote to the superior generals of the Franciscan order when he was in charge. And he said that the deepest measure of your leadership over your community is not measured by what they do, but it's by what you permit. So what are you permitting them to do?
Yeah.
That measures the quality and depth of your leadership. Second, I had a daughter who was going off the rails and we needed to put boundaries up. And it was a battle. We went through hell.
Yeah.
And one of the things she wrote a letter to us, slid it under our door in the midst of a battle we were having with her. And in it, she said, "Thank you for loving me enough to not let me get away with what you know is not good for me. Thank you for loving me enough to not let me get away with what you know is not good for me."
Yeah.
And that's where, is it accommodation or is it cowardice?
Yeah.
Am I just not strong enough to stand up and speak in and hold the line? And I think that we Americans are so used to being comfortable that we give lots of room for people to live their own life.
Yeah.
We don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if the house is on fire or if the boat is sinking,
Yeah.
I can't be comfortable and just have a dialogue. I've got to grab you and say, get out of the house. It's on fire.
Absolutely.
You are going to die.
Yeah.
You have got to get into a lifeboat. And that's been, I think, one of the hardest changes that I've had to face in my life in the last 4 or 5 years, is that I've embraced a house is on fire, you're on the Titanic and it's sinking mentality.
Yeah.
In some of the messages that I speak to people, that if I don't do that, then I'm not doing what I was meant to do. And that's not easy.
You're not serving. No, it's not.
I'm not
easy.
serving, right?
And your function, having a voice and a message to share to many, you would do us all a disservice not to do that.
Yeah. But it's hard when people are listening and saying, Tom, it's sunny outside and the birds are chirping and I'm at the soccer game. And I can remember, I'll end on this story. We were on the side of a flag football game, talking to this family, and they said, "What are you doing?" So we're moving to Spokane. And they said, "Why?" I said, "God." "Well, what are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, we've got to rescue our kids from this toxic environment they're just eviscerating their faith, and we want to rescue them." To a family whose kids are going to the same schools, on the same teams.
Yeah, that was a courageous.
And she looked at me like, it's a sunny day and there's fun and enjoyment and enjoyable. And like, are you insane?
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, it was the radical conviction of what we had gone through to bring us to that level of insight to say, we can't just hold this to ourselves. We have to share it even with people who are like, "Hey man, take a chill pill, relax."
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. But I have to sound the alarm.
Yeah. And some people just don't, by virtue of where they are in their spiritual development, have that sensitivity. I mean,
oh, I like that. So they were spiritually less than me. Yes.
Well,
no, I'm teasing you.
Yes, actually. I mean, not in a moral, not a better than.
Yeah.
But there is a spectrum. That's why we reverence the saints and they have a halo over their head in all the paintings, because we implicitly respect that they are more advanced in their awareness of what matters than I am. And
well, it's that sort of see something, say something. Right?
Well,
if the Lord has given us the ability to see into situations, if we don't say something, then we're betraying the sight we were given.
Yeah. And you have to be, but how it lands and where people receive it. I mean, it reminds me of an analogy I once heard about, like, as you're, let's say, growing in your own spiritual growth, you notice a deviation from truth or falsehood, like you'd notice a hair on your hand. You kind of notice a hair on your hand, but if you're not, on fire for the Lord and growing at a tremendous rate, you'll let things slide all over the place. As you get closer to the Lord and grow and God becomes more and more of a priority, you notice like a hair in the mouth. You kind of stop. If you're eating your sandwich, you're like, "Excuse me." And then of course, the end of the analogy is a hair in the eye. You will stop all you're doing. So I think a great litmus test on on your closeness or how much one is devoted to God is if you cannot accommodate any falsehood or any major deviation from truth. It becomes urgent. It has to be handled now. And that's what I hear in your message. Like,
I like that.
came up in your family, like this has to be handled now.
Yeah.
The woman you spoke with, who knows, maybe it was like a hair in her hand. She's like, I kind of get what you're saying, but I don't even have a sensitivity of what you're saying.
I like that. That's a good analogy. Yeah. A modern theologian said that as the number of our sins decreases, the sense of suffering over the sins that remain increases.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
that we can't settle for that. We have to address
it
that.
becomes ultra painful. Even an unforgiving look weighs on you, your conscience.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's Matt Laughlin joining me today on the program. Matt, I've enjoyed this very, very much. Matt, if folks want to learn more about your coaching, how to be in touch with you and for a life coach and a business coach, how would they do that?
Yeah, my website is ML, which is for Matt Laughlin, mlcda.com. And CDA is short for Coeur d'Alene, where I live. So mlcda.com.
mlcda.com. And again, Matt will be speaking at the Coeur d'Alene Collaborative, and that will be on October the 21st, beginning at 6 p.m. Opens for time of fellowship. I like that. Not networking, fellowship.
Yeah.
I like that was the way it was described. I think that's really cool because it shows that there's that common faith. And there are so many folks in the Coeur d'Alene area. And I even just like to call it the Spokane to Coeur d'Alene corridor.
Yeah.
Just that whole area. So many families have moved here.
Absolutely.
And to be able to connect with other folks in business and folks who are looking to grow their businesses, to be able to connect in a way that's also rooted in faith is a beautiful thing. So I think this Coeur d'Alene Collaborative is a beautiful initiative. You can sign up for that, learn more, register by going to Coeur Operations, COEUR as in Coeur d'Alene, CoeurOperations.com. You'll see a link to the Coeur d'Alene Collaborative, again, October 21st. Doors open at 6, talk by you, Matt, at 7, and then more fellowship afterwards. Matt, thanks for your time today.
Wonderful to be with you. Thank you.